If you're going away,
remember to take 702 and Cape Talk with you.
Download the Prime Media Plus app now.
6 minutes after 6, you're on 702 and Cape Talk. A very good evening to you. My name is Nokukhanya Mntambo. Always such a pleasure to be with you in the evenings. Just as you heard there, wherever you go, take 702 and Cape Talk with you. Where are you on your way to at the moment? Are you in between travels for the Christmas break, and perhaps you've decided to return to your normal base just before we head into the New Year's? Or are you now traveling perhaps home, you know, the usual, the KZNs, the Limpopos, where we all pretty much flock to during the festive summer, Kotuga they usually call us. Please do let us know where it is you are taking us on a journey with you to. Are you on your way to KZN? Are you on your way to your holiday destination, or perhaps returning? Or are you still working? So maybe you've got some work trips to finalize just before we wrap up the year. We are really keen to find out what you've got planned. 072-702-1702. You can WhatsApp us by sending a text or a voice note, just, checking in, a touch base really more than anything. Or you can tweet us at Radio 702, or you can send it directly to me at Kanya_M. You can X us, in fact. Or you can just simply give us a call. 011-883-0702. 2 hours with just you and I touching base on some important conversations. I did say last week when we kicked off this festive edition of this particular show that we will be talking about all of the things that I think are very important, and some of the contributions even come from yourselves on some of the important conversations that you want us to wrap up the year with an open 2026 with. And so on the show today, we're going to be speaking just now in a few minutes about the health implications of vaping, particularly when it comes to teens. We've seen a lot of the reports flagging their concerns, especially from health experts, and what it is that they reckon we need to do as communities to make sure that we move children away from that. So we'll start the day off, or the evening off, with that. We'll also talk about what South African laws say about dishonesty in the workplace. Are you somebody who's found yourself telling a little white lie at work or been caught out? What does the South African law say to protect you and your rights in the workplace? We'll also talk about your goals for 2026. Just again, a reflection, as we always do, a reflection of what those look like, what they should look like, how you can tweak those, considering what you were able and what you perhaps weren't able to do during the course of this year. And then, of course, one other issue, that baffles, the retail sector, particularly being able to spot fake products on your shelves when you're doing your shopping, perhaps maybe making you a little more savvy in terms of pointing those out. It's not as obvious as you think it is. So we will have Zinhle Tyikwe, who is from the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, talking to us about how to spot those. In the second hour, we'll speak about how couples really need to be talking about sex, and how to, spice things up this festive season. Are you bringing out the Father Christmas suit? Is it the hat, or is it something else? Closer to the time, I promise I will let you know, so that you know to perhaps move the kids into a different room so you have your moment to think about it. And then much later in the show, we'll wrap it up with a conversation on what to do to, look at your personal brand and how to invest in your personal brand so you are a formidable brand going into 2026.
702
and Cape Talk.
Summer.
Like I mentioned earlier, we've looked at a lot of studies that tell us just exactly why vaping is so bad among teens. And, those numbers are really shocking. There was one particular study that was done and that was published by the Lancet E-Clinical Medicine Journal, published particularly by UCT and another university in the Netherlands. And they surveyed more than 25,000 high school learners across the country, with the exception of the Northwest, because as I understand it, that particular province, didn't take part, and it refused to take part in this particular study. But from those 25,000 students that were surveyed by UCT and this other university in the Netherlands, they found that close to 16% of participants admitted to currently using vapes, and these are high school children between grade 8 and matric. Nationally, that rate of vaping ranged from 4% to about 31% by school and increased with each grade. Joining me now on 702 and Cape Talk on the line to talk to us about these numbers and why they're so worrying is medical doctor Dr Angelique Coetzee. Dr. Coetzee, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good evening, and good evening to all your listeners out there, and this is a very important topic.
Yeah. Have we fully come to understand why vaping among teens has become so attractive, Dr. Angelique Coetzee? I know this is probably something that's worth looking at so that we're able to understand the phenomenon and work backwards, perhaps, in trying to move teens particularly away from it.
Yeah, let us first just understand that vaping is not harmless, especially for our teenagers. It unfortunately exposes a developing brain and lungs to nicotine and toxic chemicals, thereby increasing the risk of addiction, mental health problems, lung injury, and even future cigarette smoking. So the key danger why we're all up in arms is around the teenage brain. So you can look at it this way, that the nicotine rewires the teenage brain, and then your adolescents became addicted faster than adults, and it affects concentration, the mood, anxiety levels, and impulse control. So it is a key danger to teenage brains. And currently, we're still struggling with laws around vaping in South Africa. It's not been implemented yet. And so because of all these nice colors and flavors, they are an easy target. Because if you get your teenager hooked onto nicotine, they're actually hooked for, most of them will be hooked for life. And also remember, it's a gateway effect. The strongest evidence shows that teens who vape are about 3 times more likely to go on to smoke cigarettes. Vaping is not preventing smoking in young people. It is unfortunately creating new smokers. I also want to explain, give clarity about what is an e-cigarette versus vaping. So your e-cigarette is the device. Vaping is the behavior. And the harm comes from vaping. Is that repeatedly inhaling addictive and toxic substances. I cannot stress this enough, regarding the harmful effects and what it can lead to for teenagers and young people.
Are the sort of toxins that we find in e-cigarettes any different from the traditional cigarettes as we know them?
So the toxins in vaping versus your cigarettes is, I think the first thing is we need to understand that the nicotine is there in both, and nicotine is what your the problem is what you are going to get as you carry on. That is what makes you addictive. Yeah. So if you look at your cigarettes that involve combustion, that's about over 7,000 chemicals. And then vaping, what is in the aerosol. So vaping does not burn tobacco, but the aerosol still contains the harmful substances. And again, nicotine here is often in very high concentrations. And the particles are very, very fine, ultra-fine particles. That means that can penetrate deep into the lungs. Then you also get your heavy metals, like your lead and your nickel, from heating the coils in the vaping. And unfortunately, also the flavoring chemicals is also linked to lung damage. So we call it the popcorn lung. And your chemicals that form new toxins when you heat that. So while the number of toxins may be lower than your cigarettes, the type and the delivery are still very, very harmful. And again, the nicotine. So there's a thing that what is very misleading is that under the teenagers that vaping is safer than smoking argument. And this only applies to adult smokers trying to quit. We also advise adult smokers not to keep on vaping. You actually only need to use that to get off your cigarettes, and you also need to stop vaping. And then that's also the argument says that, the teenagers use that it does not apply to non-smokers or teenagers. The problem, again, vaping introduced nicotine addiction that delivered toxins to developing brain and lungs, and then increase your risk of later for smoking. So your addictions, vaping can be worse, because remember what I've said, some of those devices deliver more nicotine than an e-cigarette. Than a cigarette.
The cigarette, yeah.
Yeah, so longer, stronger addiction, harder withdrawal, greater long-term dependence. So if you look at it like this, cigarettes are like a burning building full of smoke. Vapes are fewer chemicals, but they still the toxic fumes. For a teenager, breathing any of it is harmful.
Yeah.
So bottom line, cigarette, yes, more toxins, proven long-term harm. Vaping, different toxins, real and growing harm. And for teenagers, neither is safe. So it's not a harmless alternative. It's a pathway to addiction for children, for young people. So less than toxic cigarettes does not mean non-toxic, especially for children.
Yeah, Dr. Coetzee, you've mentioned the impact on lungs and the heart as well. How does that present itself in terms of the diseases that they then perhaps develop from smoking these?
So if you look at your lungs, so what you inhale is not water vapor. It's an aerosol containing nicotine, that ultrafine particles and the heavy metals, and that damage the lung. So you then see more asthma flares, breathing problems, and vaping-related lung injuries, that popcorn lungs that we are talking about. And this becomes now more prevalent. There's a lot of studies around the toxic effect on the lungs. And then, the lung is a problem, but I think the teenage brain is a bigger problem for me than only the lungs. So it's that combination and the addictiveness that is a huge problem. And here I also would like to advise parents, do not think it's cool if your child is vaping and now you say, well, it's vaping, at least not smoking cigarettes. It's not cool. It's not okay. You should not encourage your child to do either smoking cigarettes or vaping. And in the schools, we cannot expect the school to do the work that is actually needed to be done at home. But the schools also need to crack down on this. But the biggest thing, it starts with friends. It's a peer pressure that you get from the teenagers and what is happening at home. And we need to address it at that level as well. And no amount of legislation is going to sort the home environment and your friends, your teenage peer pressure. If you don't have a strong child that understands, do not get involved in this. And the reasons why. Dr.
Coetzee?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought we lost you there for 2 seconds. Just still speaking about the brain, then you said you're more concerned with the impact on the brain. With that nicotine exposure from the vaping, how does it impact concentration, memory, mood, perhaps?
So if you look at so you're sitting with a teenager, or unfortunately, we get children 10 and younger that is vaping. So that concentration is where we're now starting. So the child is not performing at school. Now, let's say the parents can afford something like your drugs for ADHD. or attention deficit disorder, and they want to use those type of medication because there's something wrong with the concentration, the marks are not good, the child is moody, so we think about depression, we think about everything else except to ask the question, is this child vaping? And if this child is vaping, how much is he or she vaping per day? And all of that affects the anxiety levels, their impulse control, their concentration. You're actually sitting already with teenagers that's difficult in their development process, and then you add this to that developing brain, and you sit with as I've said, with a child who's poorly functioning at school, and parents is on his case, the school is on his case, and everyone forget, as I've said, about the vaping.
Yeah. You mentioned that it needs a little more than just schools, sort of being the watchdog for kids who spend a lot of their time there and perhaps do a lot more vaping there than in front of their parents or within the home scenario setup. But the legislation, I think, is quite important to speak about. How far are we in South Africa in terms of the regulation, and what still needs to be done, in your opinion, so that we are addressing, because vaping and, the cigarette industry are billion rand industries. They're very lucrative. And so there's got to be a way that, even still, though they are contributing to the economy, that the legislation still protects young people particularly. So what still needs to be done? Where are the shortfalls and the gaps in the legislation to address the issues of the impact on young people?
So, I've been talking about the legislation since last year, and there's still we are far behind where it needs to be, especially when it comes to protecting the children and the teenagers. So if you look at the current position, as you have mentioned, if we look at the e-cigarettes, so your e-cigarettes are not fully regulated like your cigarettes. So your tobacco products are regulated under the Tobacco Products and Electronic Device Control. However, this bill has not yet been fully enacted into law. There's still a grey zone. The age restriction, in practice, sales to under 18s are supposed to be restricted. In reality, we all know your teenagers can easily buy vapes, online sales, informal vendors, enforcement is minimal. So this is one of the biggest failures. And if you're not going to fix that, it's going to be a problem. Also, the advertising. So unlike cigarettes, your vapes are marketed with bright colors and sweet flavors.
Yeah.
Everything that teenagers love. Those social media, as I've already said, they're advertising, targeting your young users, and your packaging often looks like sweets or tech gadgets. It's nice. So there's no effective ban on youth appealing flavors or marketing currently.
All right.
And what we would like to see that the proposed bill would do is to regulate the e-cigarettes the same way as tobacco, ban the sales, restrict advertising, limit the public use. Remember, vaping also the hubbly-bubbly, all of that.
Yeah.
And it is because it matters, because our teen vaping is rising faster than the legislation.
Absolutely.
We see the increase. You see that study that came out. So our legislation, unfortunately, hasn't kept up pace with the science or with the marketing of the vaping industry. And our children are paying that price.
Absolutely. Dr. Coetzee, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate your input on what still needs to be done to address that crisis. A growing crisis, really, it is. That's Dr. Angelique Coetzee, who's a general practitioner, just speaking to us about vaping and the implications.
Celebrating summer
On 702 and Cape Talk.
With 5 minutes to go to the bottom of the hour, I thought it would be quite important and interesting just to touch base as well with a labor expert to speak to us about what it is you need to be what it is that you need to avoid saying in the workplace to stay out of trouble. And this pertains particularly to honesty and trust, because often we're told that that's at the heart really of any working relationship, whether it's between yourself and other employees in the company or yourself and the employer itself. And so maybe to break that down for us and what the implications, the legal implications for that are, is labor expert Galenoe Modisapodi, who joins us now on the line. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners as well.
What do you reckon are some of the big issues when it comes to honesty in the workplace? Do we find that people are often fibbing? And if they are, what does that look like? Is it a lie in the CV? Is it a lie perhaps telling your employer that you did the work but you didn't, or that you did the work but it wasn't you who did it and was somebody else? How does it express itself? How do lies express themselves in the workplace?
It generally expresses itself as a lack of honesty, let's put it that way. There is no specific piece of legislation that regulates honesty, but the employment relationship itself, the foundation to it is honesty and integrity. So the employment relationship is based on a concept of what is called in the common law bona fides, or good faith. And good faith means you must be honest in your interaction, in your relationship. Otherwise, the lack thereof is a breakdown in trust. And once you have no trust, the employment relationship is almost as an end.
Yeah.
So this doesn't only apply to employment, but it also applies to business, it applies to commerce, it applies to contract, and it applies to damaging the good name of another person, or what is in law called dealing. So it applies in all areas.
Yeah.
But in employment law, it generally manifests itself as failure to be honest. In other words, you know for a fact that, for example, you were previously convicted of fraud, but you don't disclose that to your next employer. Or you were married before whilst young, but you don't disclose to your next husband that you were previously married. So from where he stands, he is marrying someone that was unmarried all along, only to find after the marriage that you were previously married. So in that instance, for example, there's the likelihood that the marriage will be dissolved instead of it going through the divorce process, because it was not based on one of the key elements, which is honesty and trust.
Sure. Does that mean then in the workplace as well, it's a fireable offence, or does it depend on the offence itself and how big it is?
It generally, if there is proof of you having been dishonest in your dealing, either in your application for employment, either in your claim to have certain qualifications or meeting the criteria for the job you're applying for, or even once you are in the job, for example, and you are now a trained financial service advisory person, consultant, you are expected as a matter of course to be honest in your dealings. So once there are certain things that you don't disclose to your client, for example, and the client then suffers damages as a result of that, they may sue your employer, and employer may subject you to a disciplinary process because you did not disclose certain things which, in terms of the principles of honesty, you are expected to disclose.
Yeah.
So the non-disclosure can be materially a cause of either termination or even cancellation of your license to trade. So as a lawyer, you can't be dishonest. As an accountant, you can't be dishonest. And as a financial service provider, you can't be dishonest. And even as a director of companies, you cannot be dishonest, because once you are, you break the relationship of trust with whoever is a stakeholder in relation to the commercial transactions that you are involved in.
Just briefly, for somebody who may be in trouble at work for perhaps having told a lie and they've been found out at work, what are the processes legally that need to be followed by the company? And, you know, what do people who may be listening at the moment who are in trouble need to be aware of in terms of, the fallout and what may come of that post?
Let's say, for argument's sake, you did not disclose that you don't have a certain degree. But over time, you have the requisite experience that you've built up. You have the requisite knowledge, but you just don't have the qualification that is required for the job. it is advisable that you do not wait for the employer to find out. It is advisable to disclose to the employer, and then the employer is to then make a determination. And then depending on the honesty of your disclosure, the employer might say, look, we accept that you did not disclose this when you should have. But now that you've put your cards on the table and you've made this contribution to the business, the obligation you'll have to then pursue is obtain the qualification. And there might be some other interim consequences that flow from that, because generally you can't just get out from scot-free. But disclosure is the advisable policy to adopt. So don't make a non-disclosure when ordinarily you should have disclosed. Because once the employer finds out, then you're on a back foot, and whatever response you give is unlikely to win the day.
All right. That's Galenoe. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Really do appreciate that. Galenoe Modisapodi is a labor expert, just speaking to us about what you do need to be aware of in the workplace, particularly when you have been caught out in a lie, big or small.
702
And Cape Talk.
Summer.
20 minutes to 7 o'clock. I do have two guests in studio with me. Anthony and Karabo have just decided to just plant themselves here while they watch the football behind me. But we continue nonetheless. You're still on 702 and Cape Talk. My name is Nokukhanya Mntambo, in for Stephen Grootes for the entire festive season. We have just 2 days to go. I don't know if you've been doing the countdown before we ring in the new year. And I hope that you've had the opportunity really to reflect on what 2025 has looked like for you and what you hope 2026 will be like. Of course, it wouldn't be a festive lineup without those reflections. And if you haven't, perhaps maybe then just use the next few minutes with us to think about what's most important for you in your reflections. The best person to help us maybe go about this, of course, is Judy Klipin, who is an author and a career coach who's on the line with us. Judy, a very good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Nokukhanya. Hi.
When we talk about annual goals and, reflecting on what our goals were for the year and for, the year to come, are those usually different from what we usually call your New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, I think that they can be different, and they actually should be different. I think that New Year's resolutions are usually about self-improvement or things that we want to do to make our personal lives feel better or make us feel more accomplished. Whereas I think a goal is far more goal-oriented. It's bigger. It's something that we want to work towards in a way that is going to substantially and sustainably contribute to progress in our lives.
Yeah. And what happens when we don't actually set goals for the year? How does that actually affect motivation or our direction or what we hope to achieve for the year?
So I think that goal setting is really important to help us with decision making and boundary setting. There's a very famous quote that says, if you don't know where you're going, then anywhere will take you there. And if we don't have a goal, then it makes it quite hard for us to assess whether we want to say yes or no to opportunities or requests. If we do have a goal, say we have a goal that we want to get a degree this year, if we know that even if we want to pass, say, 2 subjects this year, if we don't have that goal in mind, then when friends ask us to come out, to go out partying or drinking, we might say yes, instead of actually knowing that we have to stay at home to study at least 2 or 3 evenings a week. So that's what I mean when I say that I think that goals help us with decision making and boundary setting. If we don't have those goals, then we can be quite porous and we can say yes to anything that comes our way or is offered to us, without thinking about whether it's actually going to help us to get to where we want to be.
When we talk about the process, and I know you've got a whole strategy in terms of how to set those goals, that are more pointed and towards our personal, goals, I guess, for the year. But should they ever be different in terms of the strategy that we use for whether they're personal or they're professional goals, or do we treat them the same?
I think that we should treat them the same. I think that one of the reasons, the major reason actually, why we don't achieve goals, and this is whether it's personal, professional, or collective, even if it's a team goal at work, one of the major obstacles that gets in the way of our achieving our goals is ambivalence. And ambivalence is, kind of having mixed feelings about something. So on the one hand, we want to achieve it, but on the other hand, we don't. Maybe we want that promotion, but we're worried about what it'll mean in terms of time with our families or expectations from our bosses.
Yeah.
And so that ambivalence, that sense of not being entirely 100% committed to achieving that goal, that is what gets in the way of our success. And that's why it doesn't matter if it's personal, I want to lose weight, or I want to get that promotion, or the team needs to be the best team in the company. If there is any level of uncertainty or concern about what achieving that goal might mean, what changes it would demand from us, I think that's what gets in the way of our achieving our goals.
Yeah. Let's get to the interesting bit then. How do we actually set those goals that are pointed to us and that we actually think we will be able to sustain throughout the year, so that we don't falter on these come February, March, or halfway through the year?
Yeah. So there's people often talk about SMART goals, and I've got a shorter little acronym, or not an acronym, whatever it's called. I talk about true goals. So the T is that it has to be tangible. So to say to lose weight, that is not tangible. To say, or to get healthy is not tangible. To say I'm going to walk every day for 20 minutes, that is tangible. I'm going to study every day for 20 minutes, that is tangible. The R is for right for you, because so often we set goals that we think we should be setting, or that other people think we should be setting. And that's often where the ambivalence comes in. So if our boss says you should go for that promotion, but actually we're not ready for that promotion yet, but we set that goal as a promotion, and we get in the way of ourselves achieving it. We're rescuing ourselves from achieving that goal because of what it's going to mean to our lives. We're just setting ourselves up to perceive that we are failing. And so we have to be really careful that the goals that we set are right for us and that we really are committed to achieving, which leads to the U, which is unambivalent. We must be absolutely unambivalent about achieving that goal. There must be no mixed feelings, no fear or anxiety about how our life might change for the worse if we achieve that goal. And the E is, it needs to be an energy efficient goal. I work a lot with burnout, and one of the things that I see over and over again is that we are not spending our energy wisely. We are committing ourselves to actions or to goals that are using up too much energy and not allowing us to do the things that are regenerating that energy. So we really have to do something in an energy efficient way. And those are the true goals.
Judy, how do we measure how successful we've been in terms of these goals? Do we wait until the end of the year to sort of measure whether or not we were able to walk 5 kilometers a day, or 2 or 3, or whatever the T or tangible aspect of it for you was? Or do we assess them along the way for them to actually be sustainable?
I think we definitely have to assess them along the way, and we have to use them as a kind of a compass. So not only are we checking in with ourselves weekly or monthly, how am I doing here? Have I graduated from 20 minutes to 30 minutes walking? But we have to use that as an end point, as a direction that we want to get to, so that if someone comes along and asks you to do something, and you're not sure whether you want to do it or not, you can ask yourself, is doing this going to take me closer towards or further away from the goal that I have set for myself? If it is taking you closer towards it, go ahead. If it is taking you further away from it, then say no, if possible, obviously. Yeah. But that's what I'm talking about giving it gives you the opportunity to make good decisions if you know where you want to go.
Yeah. And for someone who is at the moment, going through their own reflections, trying to think about reflecting first on what it is that they were able to do for the year, and perhaps trying to carry over some of those goals into 2026, and then setting out the agenda for 2026, maybe using your true tangible, your right for you, your unambivalent and your energy efficient strategy. Somebody who is listening now, walk us through that goal setting process using that, I guess, 4-point turn, we can call it now, so that we are able to make the right goals for us.
So let's come up with a list of goals. And some of those are going to be personal, some of them are going to be professional, right? Up 5 or 6 goals. And then go and evaluate each of them. So, for instance, losing weight. Sorry, I'm always use losing weight, but it's especially at this time of year, everyone wants to lose weight. Yep. Losing weight, okay. Is it tangible? Not really, okay. So you have to make it tangible. You have to say, I'm going to lose 500 grams a week, or otherwise I'm going to eat an apple every day. I don't know, something that is tangible. Then again, you have to then assess, okay, is it right for me? Am I doing this because I want to lose the weight, or am I doing it because my partner says I need to lose the weight, or my mother says I need to lose the weight? If it is right for me, if it is something that I want to do for the right reasons for me, carry on. Then we get to unambivalent. Is this something that I'm absolutely 100% committed to achieving? Is there any worry about what will happen to me or how things might change for me if I meet this goal? I can't tell you how often people come to me, they say they want to, as I've said, they want to be promoted, or they want to lose weight, or they want to get married, whatever. But when they think about what that might mean for them when they achieve that, it's actually quite terrifying for them, because in their mind, the consequences of achieving that goal are really not that great.
Yeah.
And so if you're unambivalent about it, carry on. Next thing, energy. Is it a responsible use of my energy? Am I going to be putting too much effort into this for the potential rewards? Or is it sustainable? Am I going to be able to sustainably put the amount of energy that is needed into it so that I can reach that goal without completely depleting myself and burning out? If it's energy efficient, carry on. Then you've got that goal. Then you can move on to the next one and interrogate that one. And if you say no to any of those 4 questions, then just put that goal down, either for now or possibly forever.
Sure. That's Judy. Judy, thank you so much for your time this evening. I hope that if you're listening at the moment, you were able to take down those notes from Judy, setting Agenda 2026 using that 4-point strategy: true, tangible, your right for you, your unambivalent, and your energy efficient, going through that checklist by Judy. Hopefully you're able to set your agenda for 2026, and hopefully it's a sustainable one. And we have this conversation next year, having been able to meet all of those targets. That's Judy Klipin, who is an author and career coach.
Celebrating summer
On 702 and Cape Talk.
One of the other things that I mentioned that I want us to make sure that we're able to do as consumers, generally conscious consumers, is being able to spot out, goods that may not necessarily be legitimate on the shelves. And it's becoming harder and harder, I think, especially when you think of, and I don't know if you saw it, I think it may have been a week or 2 ago, when we saw an article talking about how honey, the honey isn't what you would put in your tea or coffee, or in your tea preferably, is on the shelves, but not all of them are legitimate products. And I thought, good gracious, how is that even possible? So the best person to perhaps, speak to us about this and how we probably are able to become conscious consumers, and why we're seeing more of these products on the market undercutting legitimate, retailers, is Zinhle Tyikwe, who's the CEO of Consumer Goods Council South Africa. Zinhle, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for holding the line. We're seeing a lot of this more and more on the shelves. Why is it?
Good morning, good afternoon, Nokukhanya and your listeners, and thank you for having us this Monday or Tuesday.
It's Monday. It's evening and it's Monday. Just a quick catch up there.
Yes, definitely in South Africa we are seeing an increase in illicit and counterfeit of goods and food in particular, and alcohol and tobacco. These are products that have seen a huge increase in the influx of counterfeit and illicit goods into the market in South Africa. And yes, we do understand that the consumers are financially strained and they're always looking for bargains and, obviously cheap products, but we want them to be aware and vigilant because these cheap imports that are coming into the country, some are, manufactured in our homes, in the homes of these suppliers, and the verification, various issues of this, how they bring them into the country. And these are like issues of bread and butter, number one, number two, life and death. And as a consumer goods council, as you already said, we are really creating awareness to consumers to say they must be vigilant and they must know what is it that they're buying, who are they buying from, and where is it sourced. Because for any producer to operate in this country needs to have, the article that you're referring to, you need to say who's the producer, where are they based, what is the content of the product that they have manufactured, and what is the barcode. You can scan the barcode. We have an app that is out in the market where it's called My CSA app. You can scan that app and then it can tell you who's the producer, the address of the producer, and you can then look in your product, the labeling, and see if that information is the same. And if that information is not the same, then you must be suspicious and then report that.
Is the reason why we're seeing more and more of these products on the shelves because they're able to bypass? You mentioned a lot of them are imports from outside of the country coming in and then onto the shelves. Is it because they're bypassing a particular system, or are the people who are stocking these also aware of the fact that they counterfeit and illegal goods as well?
Definitely. Obviously we have challenges with our borders. Our government does not have enough capacity to make sure that they are able to check each and every product that comes into our ports and our borders in the country. So that is one of our biggest problems, because obviously we still have manual systems in terms of how are we checking this product. Whereas globally, elsewhere in the world, they're using a system like the GTIN. The GTIN is a technical name for a barcode because it's called GTIN, is Global Trade Identification Number, which is the barcode, because each and every product that must come into the country that is manufactured anywhere in the world must have this barcode, which then can be scanned and then you can have this information. There's a lot of technological standards that are used elsewhere in the world that are used by customs institutions similar to SARS, the tax revenue institutions, that can enable to track and say, where's the country of origin? Who's the brand owner or the manufacturer? And which country is it intended for sale? These are all rules and regulations that South African government wants. And unfortunately, the mechanism to monitor and track all of these are still a challenge in South Africa. But as an industry, from an industry perspective, we have this capability, and we have been speaking to government and advocating to government to say we can assist, and let's look and say how do we make sure that we legalize and say in each and every product that comes into this country, this is the barcode that it needs to have, and this barcode can be tracked anywhere in the world, because that right now that's not the law in this country.
Yeah, a two-pronged approach then. Perhaps first on the Consumer Goods Council, speak to me about how you make sure, with those conversations with government and so on and the retailers, to make sure that the goods that are on the shelves are legitimate and, of course, by implication, especially when we speak about food products, are healthy for the consumers who then buy them. And then secondly, just as consumers, when I'm in a shop and I see honey, and I make the example of honey because we spoke about that particular article, I see a bottle of honey, which generally would be about 100 and something rand. It's gotten that expensive, but suddenly retails for about 50 rands. How do I know that this may not be the product I'm looking for?
So, let me just take a step back, because illicit and counterfeit is becoming massive in this country, and it's becoming an economy on its own that is siphoning money out of our revenue and our tax space as a country. And it's taking money, exactly like the article said, from legitimate businesses that are creating employment in this country. Again, it weakens our institutions because as consumers, we're seeing law enforcement are not taking charge on these individuals or on these businesses, and we're thinking, it's easy to do crime because law enforcement agencies in this country are not able to cap all of this and hold these individuals responsible because the law enforcement or tax authorities are under-resourced, customs agencies and our financial intelligence units are struggling to keep pace with all of these cross-border schemes and digital laundering tactics that are taking place because it is that much sophisticated. So what we have done, we have there's other associations in this country, like the liquor associations, like in SALBA, BASA, DFSA, National Liquor. So we partnered with all of them, even BLSA, Santaka, from a toys perspective. That you cannot believe that toys are counterfeit. The Dairy Association as well. These are all associations that we have all come together and formed the task teams. These task teams are definitely to work together because we're saying we are all doing the same thing, but we're doing it separately. We're not coming together in a collective manner so that we can have a powerful voice when we're talking to government and when we're talking to consumers, because it's the same thing, but too many people, too many voices, and we're saying the same thing differently. But if we have all come together and say in one voice, everybody that is talking to say, this is how we want to cap and work together in a partnership for collective action against illicit economy, because we're realizing that this challenge is huge just to be faced by one organization or the other. So what we have done to date, obviously we have a marketing campaign that is called Check a Daideng. We're saying to consumers, check what you buy, what you're consuming, what you bringing inside your home, inside your family. Right. There's regulations that in this country you need to adhere to. Number one, the labeling regulation that exactly tells what needs to be in that label. You know your product as well because it's your favorite, whether it's honey or a liquor or any type of food. You know how it looks. You can see the textures. You can see the color is not the same.
Of course.
The label. But also we want to put the capability to consumers. Download the app, which is available on Android as well as on the Apple Store, my CGCSA. Why? Because we have a registry that is all barcodes. If any producer that is producing a product buys a barcode so that it can be able to operate in a point of sale. And this is going to tell you which country of origin is it at and which country of origin is it intended for.
All right, Zinhle, I do apologize. We are sadly out of time. A very important conversation there with Zinhle Tyikwe, who's the CEO of the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, speaking to us about how you yourselves as a consumer in the stores can become a bit more conscious. Make sure you are familiar with the brands and use the app if you are unsure of a particular item in the store.
Relax this summer
with podcasts from your favorite shows
on primemediaplus.com.
9 minutes after 9, you're still on 702 and Cape Talk. My name is Nokukhanya Mntambo. Thank you so much for joining us in the second hour of the show. I hope you see it through all the way to the very end with us. But even after this show, of course, we continue to bring you regular programming. For those that are interested, that perhaps are on the road and not watching the game, we are still on a... Peter, is that not 2 now? Oh, no. Now it is 2. It was still draw 1-1 2 seconds ago when I checked the TV. It is a 2 now to South Africa. Unfortunately, I have my back to the TV, so I did not see who put that one at the back of the post. So if you are able to perhaps update me, we're going to do it the other way around. I'm even looking outside of the screen. Yes, it is 2, guys. I'm looking on the other side of the producer's booth and everybody is jumping up and down there as well. The excitement on the other end, 2-1 to South Africa. Of course, we are playing that AFCON game with Zimbabwe. If you are please able to update me and let me know who put that in the back of the net. Please let me know, where are you watching that particular game from? What are your expectations for the rest of the game? And do you think we can do even better than that 2-1? 072-702-1702 is our WhatsApp line. You can send us a voice note or a text, 011-883-0702 if you want to give us a call. Maybe a quick rundown by voice note, if you have a moment, please, a quick rundown of what that first half looked like. You can also send us an X at Radio 702 for the official page, and mine is Khanya_M.
702 and Cape Talk.
Lives online on primemediaplus.com.
In the meantime, of course, we continue with regular programming. And in this hour, I mentioned that I want us to have a conversation about how couples can spice it up and keep that flame alive, particularly now when you have perhaps spare time to spend with your partners at home. And then, of course, this one article that I read, that it was a BBC article, if I'm not mistaken, that spoke about how adult stores in South Africa have gone mainstream and they're flourishing in South Africa. And I thought it would be a good time to then perhaps have a conversation with Tracy Ziman Jacobs, who's an intimacy and relationship coach. Tracy, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us. I also did say to the listeners, I would give you a heads up in terms of the little ones in the room. It is slightly adult, well, I don't want to say content, but, of a more mature age. So please just be cautious of that as well. Tracy, good evening. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Good evening, Khanya. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Are we seeing a shift in how we see sex, intimacy, sexual wellness in the country? I mentioned that article. Is there a shift that we're seeing, or is there still stigma attached to those sort of conversations around sex and sexuality and sex education?
There definitely is a shift because there is far more consciousness. Social media is flooded with articles and reels, and TikTok and Instagram are flooded with intimacy coaches and psychologists such as myself who are talking about communication and how to encourage more intimacy and more connection in relationships. However, I have found that it is still taboo. The subject of sex and closer sexual relationships is actually still something that we're still treading lightly. It is something that's kind of taboo to talk about. But as I say, the awareness is there, but still quite not where we need it to be.
Yeah, the fact that it's become a bit more big business in South Africa, and the fact that we're seeing more of those conversations on social media. I don't know, in your experience, perhaps, has that started to shape also the expectations around intimacy and how we approach it within our intimate relationships?
Well, a lot of my clients come to me asking for more help with intimacy, and what they really want, they say they want more sex in their relationship. But the truth of the matter is that intimacy is really connection. And what they're really craving is more connection. They think that if they're having more sexual intimacy, then they will be more connected. But what really is needed is a feeling of safety and a feeling of trust and connection, which is not what they're not having. So they're seeking for more sex, trying to find the more connection, but they're going around it, about it in the wrong way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They need to establish the safety in the relationship. They need to be communicating in a different way. They need to be more curious. They need to be having those conversations where there is space in the relationship to have those conversations around sex and what it means and what they want and what they don't want, in order for the true sexual intimacy to take place.
Is that a conversation, Tracy, that we usually have to have with an expert like yourself, or is it a conversation that we're able to start as partners at home, on our own at least, before we perhaps bring in the expertise of somebody else from outside?
Well, hopefully we can start to educate the younger generation to start communicating a way in which that we are heard, that we have the space to ask questions, where our questions are not considered taboo, where we have adults or teachers who are able to give us information, give young children information about sexual intimacy that is not so scary and so, we're told that sex, the most terrible things about sexual intimacy in terms of what to experience, what not to do, how punishable it is, and so on. If we give our children the right facts and we actually tell them that sexual intimacy is actually very pleasurable, and it done in this way, you can avoid the pitfalls of teenage pregnancy and STDs, HIV, all these kinds of things. We don't hone in on all the negatives, but we hone in on the fact that our bodies are vessels of pleasure, and that sex is enjoyable and it's fun, but it has to be done under certain boundaries where the children or the teenagers or whatever it is feel safe. Then we are telling them that different conversations need to be had. So couples who are also not so used to having conversations around sex, sexuality, and what they need from each other can start having these conversations at home without the help of a therapist. But the right questions need to be asked. So for couples who are not used to talking about it openly, there's a way in which we need to, the questions around the subject need to be approached in a safe environment, where the couples do feel as though they can talk openly and they won't feel judged by their partners. And that's the kind of environment we're trying to foster.
What do you reckon are perhaps the top two questions that couples need to be asking each other within that, context, when they are trying to have more of those conversations, to spice things up in a manner that's still respectful and, as you just said, still safe as well? The top two questions.
Well, okay, that's a bit difficult, but I'm going to try and make it brief. Something like, what do you love about me? What do you love about me when I am touching you? Or how do you feel safe when I'm with you? What kind of touch would you like to receive from me? There are so many questions, but it's more those kinds of open questions where it invites conversation, where if you really ask the question, you really want the answer.
And if you're not getting the sort of reception that you're hoping for, and it doesn't necessarily either start the conversation or ignite the flame, within the couple itself, when there's one party at least that starts the conversation, but it's not been received the way that they want, what's the approach then? How do you either, try to find a way again to find common ground, or is it just a conversation that you just sort of slide under the rug and keep it moving for now just because there's discomfort?
So we definitely avoid the sliding under the rug and hoping that things will get better. That's the time where we start to seek intimacy coaching, such as myself, because there's often, 9 times out of 10, deeper issues that couples need to confront when it comes to being okay with their own sexuality and with their own upbringing around the messages that were given to them around who they are, women particularly, the messages that they were given around sex and sexuality and how they should behave and what's okay and what's not okay, and men as well. Especially in the culture that we're living in now, men need to know how to treat women, what they want, how to listen, how to hear. these are the conversations that a lot of the time couples need to be having with the guidance of a therapist or a counselor.
Yeah. I don't know if that's an easy conversation to have. How do we find the right intimacy coach for a particular couple? I don't know if it's, one size fits all, so to speak. How do we go about finding the right person to have those conversations with and to bring into these discussions? I don't know if there's a lot of intimacy coaches, but how do you find the right one and a legitimate one while you're at it?
Yeah, good, excellent question, because there's not a one size fits all. And so my suggestion would be that you would make an appointment with, it's not just finding a psychologist, because sometimes psychologists don't go into sexuality or look at the sexual connection within a relationship, but it's the one who does look at the sex and the sexual relationship or lack thereof in a relationship. But it's meeting with that therapist and feeling, finding out if there is some kind of trust in the relationship, if there's safety in the relationship with this therapist. Can I actually feel like this is a safe space for us to grow together? Is the therapeutic space a safe space where I can ask questions, where I can be vulnerable with my partner? And that will really be the foundation upon which you can thrive with the therapist involved.
Yeah. Tracy, thank you so much for sharing that with us this evening. That's Tracy Ziman Jacobs, who's an intimacy and relationship coach. Just maybe taking us through what it is that you can do as a couple to try and reignite that spark between yourselves, how to have that important conversation. And if it's not a conversation that you're able to have amongst yourselves, perhaps seeking the help of someone like Tracy Ziman Jacobs, who is an intimacy coach.
Relax this summer
with podcasts from your favorite shows
on primemediaplus.com.
Just a gentle reminder again, if you have missed any of the conversations that we have throughout the evening, you're more than welcome to find all of those. They will be available on the Prime Media Plus app or primemediaplus.com. All of those are up there for you. Please share them far and wide with whoever you think needs to hear them. 8 minutes to go to past. We switch now just a little slightly to how perhaps African content creators, and we've been talking about content creators and, the social media space in the different conversations that we've had throughout the show. But the question really then becomes how the people that are producing the content that you get to see are making a buck out of it and are able to make careers, sustainable ones, out of it, whether it's the social media posts, it's podcasts, it's YouTube, and any other of the digital platforms that are available. How do they tell local stories, build communities, reach global audiences while still benefiting from it? Justine Nienaber, who joins us now on the line, is perhaps the best person to take us through this. Justine is the CEO of Punky Starfish, a digital agency, and she can shed a bit more insights on this. Justine, a very good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on 702 and Cape Talk. Justine, are you
a
with
big...
us? There we go.
There we go. Hello. Yes.
Justine, a very important conversation, of course. Content creators have also got to live. Are we behind the curve as African content creators compared to the rest of the world in terms of monetizing content?
Yes, I think that, content creators in general aren't as aren't thinking ahead as much as content creators internationally are. That being said, I do think in general, content coming out of Africa is world class. I mean, the content creators that are on the platforms that are creating content are doing it to a high level. But yes, there's a lot of opportunity still in how they can monetize. I think a lot of content creators rely on brands for partnership. And I think that's where, there's a lot of other opportunities available to them as opposed to working with a brand.
Perhaps maybe take us through what those other opportunities are. There's the brand content that you spoke about. What else? What other opportunities are available?
So I think there hasn't been a lot done with affiliate marketing. So, that is using your content to drive sales. I think there are a few brands in South Africa that are doing it, but not as big as it is internationally. I do think definitely into, 2026, still can't believe I'm saying that. It feels like the beginning of 2025, but going into 2026 with, the rise of e-commerce, brands and companies and people want to know that if I'm paying you to create content, it is generating X amount of sales, and that can be done through affiliate marketing. The sad reality is that we don't get nice things in Africa, like a TikTok creator rewards program, for example. Yeah. There has been limited rollout of it into Africa, but, it's not as ludicrous of a earning platform as it is to people in the States. So platform payouts are huge. There's TikTok, there's YouTube. There's a lot of South African YouTubers that I don't think get the kind of earnings or put as much effort into longer form content as our international counterparts. UGC content creation for brands, I think, is a huge opportunity. So, if you know how to grow your platform, you know how to do that for brands. And I think a lot of people want the brand to work with them on their own platforms, and they sometimes forget about, creating local, authentic content for brands. I think that's another great way. Then merchandising and creating your own physical products. One of my favorite TikTokers is Sethole, Scrumptious. She's done this fantastically. She's just brought out her own lip gloss that she's selling. So now not only is she creating branded content, she's also on a monthly basis can be selling her own product. Her lip gloss is really great. Then also creating digital products. And I think this is where, in particular, African content creators aren't doing enough. We have so much knowledge and skill in this country and in Africa in general. You could package that into an ebook on how to grow your account, onto a guide for TikTok, for Instagram, for YouTube, building a toolkit. Is it how to, a toolkit on the best products to buy with an affiliate link that you can then not only be selling the digital product and getting, affiliate payouts from the camera you're recommending or the phone you're recommending or the ring light. And that's something that I don't see a lot of creators doing. And then also courses and workshops, masterclasses. This is any time that you can give your community access to you to learn is something that people who are really bought into you online would pay money for. And that personal touch on how you've grown and sharing your skill is also really valuable. And then, it's, I guess, coaching people how to grow on these platforms, how you started, how you got there. All brands want to have TikTok or Instagram accounts that are growing, have an active community, but they don't always have the manpower to be creating content as much as somebody who can just pull out their phone and start documenting things. So, giving that sort of coaching on how you could run your brand Instagram or TikTok account as a personal account is hugely valuable. Yeah. And then last one is also something that we don't do enough of here in Africa. And, it's one of my bugbears is memberships and subscriptions. If you really, really love a content creator, and I do this internationally, but there's just not a lot of content creators that have these platforms set up properly in South Africa. But, you could set up a Patreon account where once a week you go live with your community. They can ask you questions, they can connect with you one-on-one, and they pay a little subscription for that, and that starts to make the content creation side of things more sustainable. We all want to know what's going to land up in our bank account at the end of the month. And sadly, being a content creator, it's much like a freelancer. You don't know if there are some months that you could be making huge amounts of funds, and there's some months where you could make nothing, whereas a subscription or using the sort of subscription platforms that are available starts to make your monthly income, more comfortable.
Yeah. Justine, we're going to have to wrap it up there for the evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure that you're following some of those tips and tricks from Justine. Brand endorsements are obviously the low-hanging fruit when it comes to content creation and monetizing on that. But there's also affiliate programs that you can hop onto, the platform payouts that aren't necessarily as big in South Africa and Africa compared to the rest of the world, merchandising, creating the digital products, and of course subscriptions to support some of the content creators who are creating local content particularly. That's Justine Nienaber, who is the CEO of Punky Starfish Digital Agency, speaking to us about how to monetize on content creation in South Africa and Africa overall.
If you're going away,
Remember to take 702 and Cape Talk with you.
download the Prime Media Plus app now.
25 minutes to 8. We only have 25 minutes left of the show. As always, it's flown by so quickly. I did mention earlier that if you've missed any of the conversations that we've had throughout the show, you will find the podcast versions of those conversations on our Prime Media Plus app and primemediaplus.com. So, you are more than welcome to pop onto those and find the conversation that we had earlier with Dr Angelique Coetzee, speaking about the health implications of vaping, particularly when it comes to teens. We had a conversation about what the law says about dishonesty in the workplace and whether or not it's a fireable offence, and what to do if you do find yourself in a sticky position with your employer at the moment. We had that conversation with a labour expert, Galenoe Modisapodi, who gave us some insights on those. We, as always, spoke about Agenda 2026, what needs to go into the process for your goal setting for the year, looking at, that 4-point step that we spoke about with Judy Klipin, who's an author and career coach. True was the one that she used. And then, of course, just before we wrapped up that 6 o'clock hour, we also spoke to Zinhle Tyikwe, who's the CEO of Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, about how to spot fake and counterfeit products on the shelves, whether we're talking about food products or we're talking about clothes, and why exactly we've seen an upshoot of those products, being imported into the country, and what exactly you can do as a consumer standing at the shelves trying to figure out whether or not you're buying the right goods or not. I think we do have some trust as far as possible in some of the reputable, the big retailers that we often go to. We have some trust in the fact that if they are on the shelves, then they've probably passed all the right, steps in terms of getting onto the shelves. And just in this hour, on the first half of the show, on just after 7 o'clock, apologies, we spoke to Tracy Ziman Jacobs, who's an intimacy and relationship coach, on how to spice up your relationship, especially during the festive. Now that you have some time to spare, have those conversations with your partners, those sometimes tough conversations. And then just before we took Eyewitness News headlines, we had a conversation as well with Justine Nienaber, who's the CEO of Punky Starfish Digital Agency, about content creation and monetizing the content that you put out there so that it pays you to create content as well. And now in these last 20 minutes that we have on the show, back by popular demand, I want to say we have Nomndeni Sethole, who's the CEO and founder of Agenda Woman, coming back this time to speak to us about how you then create your personal brand. And I think it ties in quite nicely with some of the conversations we've had, especially with that previous one with Justine, about putting your brand out there. But how do you create your personal brand? How do you become a personal brand? Nomndeni, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for coming back to 702 and Cape Talk.
Good evening, Nokukhanya. Clearly, this is home now.
Look, any time for you.
This is home.
Please, Nomndeni, tell me, why is it so important that we build a personal brand? And, how do we become conscious of the brand that we put out there for people that we engage with, whether it's on social media, whether it's on the airwaves like you and I are doing right now, or whether it's just face-to-face conversations that we have with people on a day-to-day?
Firstly, I think the number one point is when you're thinking about personal branding is maybe let me start with the myth, right? And the stereotypes around personal branding. It is not about being on social media. I have to repeat this. A personal brand is not about a social media footprint. I'll come back to this if we get a chance.
Yeah.
But the importance of personal branding, Nokukhanya, as we go into 2026 and the years that are coming, is that we're seeing such a high rise of AI, right? We have, when you go on YouTube, for instance, there's so many channels that don't have personalities where it's someone's voice. I've seen it with people like Miles Monroe and so many other popular names that it's going to be very, very difficult in the future to figure out what is the truth from a lie. It's the same when you think about your work. What is going to make you exceptionally special when you're going to have a world where a lot of businesses and organizations are going to be looking at technology for skill sets? And that is going to be the magic of a personal brand that is strong and a value proposition that is clear around what you bring to the table. That is going to be the importance of personal branding when we go into the future. That you have a clear, unique selling proposition that communicates your value intrinsically to any organization, and you are clear at every touch point that people experience you, that you make sure that the USP shines through.
Yeah, just maybe let's start with what you were hoping that we'd maybe circle back to a little later, but that conversation about the fact that it's not just limited to social media, but it's those face-to-face conversations that we have with people. Why is it important for you to draw that distinction firstly?
So at the beginning of 2025, I launched masterclasses on personal branding. I saw an incredible uptake of those masterclasses. I went in and I wanted to do like 100 tickets to sell. We ended up with 200 in 8 days for Johannesburg alone. We did the same in Durban and Cape Town. And then we launched coaching. Personally, I've been coaching people who are founders and corporate working women, particularly on personal branding. And one of the things that I've seen is that people think that you have to be on social media to build a personal brand. Yeah. Social media is not a brand. It is a platform. It is a place where you go and communicate your brand. Sometimes I'll have people coming into the coaching session saying, I don't want to be on Instagram. And I say, I don't know. It will be determined by where your audience is and what you want to say. For instance, a lot of corporate working people honestly don't need to be on Instagram unless they're doing it for fun and they want to share their private moments with their families. But most of the opportunities that they want to market to, they want to market their personal brands to, are probably on a platform like LinkedIn. So I want to make a clear distinction for anyone who feels anxiety around building a personal brand, thinking that, number one, they have to create visibility for everyone, and number two, that they have to be on social media. One of the tasks that I go on with my personal brand coaching clients is, who is your target audience? If your boss, for instance, is your target audience and you're very clear around you want to get a promotion, then the person you need to target is your boss. And you need to think about all the places where they're consuming data, particularly around work or even about you, and you position yourself for visibility on those platforms. So it's not about being on every platform. It's about being clear about who your target audience is, what you want to say, what they determine as value, and what the outcome you want is, and where you then start to have that conversation so that you have the visibility that you want to have.
When you do have a strong personal brand, what is the impact for whether you're looking at your career growth, whether you're looking at business opportunities, or even your earning potential. What's the impact of a really good, strong personal brand?
I think like any brand, Nokukhanya, it's about being top of mind. And not just being top of mind, having consistency around the experience that people have of you. So when you think about brands that are strong, let's say Coca-Cola, for instance, because personal branding and corporate branding are similar but not the same, right? So when you think about Coca-Cola and the promise that they make to you, it's around refreshment. Most of the time when you think about grabbing a Coke, it's because you are thirsty. You should be grabbing water maybe, but top of mind, you're thinking, I need refreshment. And that's the promise that they're going to deliver on. That makes a strong brand. When people think about you, what do they believe the outcome is going to be of having an experience with you? Consistent delivery on that promise is what makes you a strong personal brand. In the workplace, for instance, if you decide, I want to be a reliable person, I want to be the person they think about first when they think about problem solving, whether there's detriment to that or there are positives to that, let's just say that's the statement that your personal brand delivers on. Then what you go out and set out to do is that you're top of mind every time there's a problem that needs to be solved. And then you start to determine how does that get you to the ranking in a professional setting that you want. It doesn't have to be the same for everyone, but you have to have a clear statement that says this is the outcome that people are going to have when they experience me. And what you then do is build your behavior around delivering on that outcome consistently. Then your brand is strong. For whatever the reason is, you have to have that statement and you need to deliver on the statement consistently.
Earlier, Nomndeni, we had a conversation about setting goals for 2026. So when you look at some of the goals, whether it's in your personal capacity or within your professional space, when you look at some of the goals that you've set, how does that then play into the personal brand that you have or that you're trying to create, or vice versa, really? How does which one play into the other?
There's an exercise that I take my clients through when I do master classes and workshops. I do workshops also for corporate organizations, and I've worked with so many, BMW, L'Oreal, My Way, etc. One of the things I say is, think about the 3 terms that you want people to consistently say when they talk about you, right? You're not in the room. Someone is talking about you. I'll tell you mine, for instance. Mine is warmth. The second one is excellence. And the third one is intention. And every single time I hear people talking about me and those names come up, it means I'm doing right when it comes to how I'm showing up as a personal brand. So for every single person, you have to determine what those 3 words are for yourself. And those words are going to be linked to the outcome that you want in terms of success for yourself. And you can do a litmus test where you go to just 5 people who are close to you and you ask them the same thing. What are the 3 words that you would use in describing me? When you look at what your ambitions are and what those words are, you start to determine if you are doing the right things that get you to the place where you want to go. So even as you go into 2026, go into 2026 with those 3 words and don't do more than 3. Try as much as you can to limit it to only 3 words. And as the year begins, ask 5 people who are close to you. People who like you, people who don't like you, people who have intimacy with you, people who don't have intimacy with you, but just people who get to experience you. What are their 3 words when they think about describing you? And start to set your goals around what will get you to a place where the 3 words that you want to be described as are the 3 words that people give you back when you ask them this question. So then the behavior, the habits, and whatever it is that you're going to be building for the year, you make sure that they deliver that outcome for you when you get to the middle of the year or whatever your goal timeline is going to be.
Yeah. And when we are reflecting on building that personal brand, what do you reckon are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen people make when they are trying to build it or manage their personal brands, whether it's an established one or somebody who's only now thinking about what that brand needs to look like?
That's an interesting question. I often don't think in that direction, but it's a good thing for people to be able to determine what it is that they need to not be doing. And I think one of the things, particularly even as you think about goal setting, is just doing too much, Nokukhanya. You can't set 20 goals for 2026. You have to figure out what your rhythm is when it comes to your capacity. And when you think about personal brand building as well, it's a long game. There are going to be things that you'll be able to achieve in 2026, 2027, 2028, 29, and 30. And I know it can feel overwhelming to think of your life in a 5-year span. And if that's what it feels like for yourself, I want to encourage you to just set one goal for the next 3 months. I know it sounds like it's little, but once you get into it, you start to realize how much it takes to actually show up consistently. So let's say if the one goal I want to set for the next 3 months around my personal brand is that people start to think of me as a person that shows up in an excellent way, then what I start to determine is where are the touch points where people are experiencing me? Networking situations, work environments, friendships, social media, if you're going to be on social media. What is it going to take for people to say, she shows up in an excellent manner? I'll tell you in my personal capacity for 2025, for instance, one of the things I set out to do was I'm not going to have a lot of posts on my social media, but whenever I post, it was going to be an excellent post. And yes, someone can say that goes against authenticity, but that only matters if authenticity is one of my words. If authenticity is not one of my words and excellence is, then I'm going to show up once a month and it's going to be the most beautiful post, the most curated post with a clear call to action. And if authenticity is yours, then you have a different objective that you want to reach. So I just want to say, choose one word for the next 3 months, choose behavior and activity that's going to support that word, and set out to make that a goal that you achieve by March.
You made quite an interesting point about platforms and how you go about figuring out where your audience is and how that's geared to. Does that matter based on what field you're in, or does that really depend on what it is that you're hoping to achieve? So when you're speaking about your audience reach, how do you figure that out? And how do you then set forward trying to reach that particular audience?
Platforms are about audiences through and through. Once you've figured out who your audience is, you have to determine where they are, right? And I'm going to go back to corporate working spaces because I feel like a lot of, particularly I work with women who are in corporate working spaces, feel like social media is not for them. So for me, for instance, because I work with women who are founders and who are in corporate working spaces, I know a lot of women are on Instagram. I also understand what they value. I also understand what they determine as excellence. This is the background work that I've done to better understand how to position myself for them. So when I speak about personal branding, I know what they believe a good personal brand looks like, and I show up in that manner, and that's how I convert. So it filters through to my retail space. So if I'm thinking I want to show up, I want to use fashion, there is a channel for me that's in the retail space where I can pull some of the clothing that is there, bring it into my personal branding narrative. But for instance, if you are a woman who wants to climb up the corporate ladder and you are speaking to someone who is looking at how do you think about leadership? How do you think about the brand that you work for? Those people are mostly speaking on LinkedIn. So it might not benefit you much to be on Instagram unless it's something that you really like, but the voice that you want to build and establish might be more prominent on a platform like LinkedIn. And then for that reason, you want to make sure you utilize that to the best of your ability. You have to determine who your audience is. You have to understand what the value proposition that you want to deliver is. Then you have to find the platform that's going to give you the space to be able to do that in the best of your ability.
Yeah. If you're just joining us now, we're speaking to Nomndeni Sethole, who's the CEO and founder of Agenda Women here on 702 and Cape Talk, just looking at how to invest in your personal brand, not just going into 2026, but I think just as a general exercise for the sake of longevity in whatever it is that you hope to achieve. Please, the tips that Nomndeni has been giving us so far are, I think, so fundamental in building that personal brand. If you do have a question, maybe one or two for Nomndeni, you're more than welcome to pose those to us on 072 702 1702. That's our WhatsApp line. You can drop us a text or a voice note. They pay Nomndeni big bucks to give us some of the insights that she's giving us. In just a moment, we'll come back to Nomndeni to perhaps get a step-by-step guide, I guess, on how to build that and how to maintain that brand.
Celebrating summer
on 702 and Cape Talk.
6 minutes to go to the top of the hour. Nomndeni Sethole is still with us. She's the CEO and founder of Agenda Woman. Nomndeni, thanks again still for being with us. How do I know that my personal brand is impactful in whatever it is that I've set out to do? How do I measure that?
The same way that you measure any goal, are you getting the results that you want? And I think this is fundamental in going into the conversation of goal setting, that the importance of goal setting is that it becomes your KPI. Without a clear goal that is smart, right, that is specific, that is measurable, that you can articulate, that it has a timeline, you're not going to be able to measure if you're effective or not. Then, as young people call it, you're just doing it for vibes. You have to be clear about what success looks like in order to be able to determine whether you're successful. It's the same thing with debt management. If you're saying you want to be able to get out of debt, you have to be able to know how much debt you have so that you know that you're out of it. It's very, very important to be very clear about what success is going to look like and the timeline that's going to get you there.
And in an instance where you feel it's not necessarily being impactful and you think it may be time to rebrand, how do you work through that? How do you either, whether it's an issue of impact and you don't think it's being impactful, or you're having to rebuild, reposition your personal brand, whether after a setback or a career change or there's controversy, how do you rebrand after, setting out what your personal brand is?
I want to say you need to just get onto my coaching sessions. That's one of the things that you can do.
Yeah.
But outside of that, you have to go back to the drawing board. And maybe I can share some of the steps that you can go into, which I take people through when I do coaching sessions. So I offer 10 sessions after I've done a discovery call, because I always want to get a sense of, are you looking for what I can help you with? And after the discovery call, if I feel like maybe it's not personal branding that you need, or maybe there isn't an alignment in values and you're looking for something different, then I don't continue. But if I do continue, one of the first steps I start with is determining your why. It's going into your golden circle. So after about 2 sessions, we explore your why. What is it that you want? Why do you want to build a personal brand? That's the best way to explain it. Why do you want to build a personal brand? And again, I want to use a corporate working woman example, right? Yeah. So I want to build a personal brand because I want to create visibility in front of, let's say you're working in one department, you want to create visibility for another department. I'm going to use an example of a lady who I coached who was in HR, and she wanted to get a particular promotion. So firstly, you know that the person who is your target audience is the person that has to make the decision around that promotion. So we go into your why, because what your why does is it helps you articulate a clear USP. So a USP is your unique selling proposition. Let's say for you, Nokukhanya, your why is you are passionate about seeing young people move up the corporate ranks, right? And you're in HR. So you're sitting in the best position to be able to assist people to better understand how to navigate the workplace. How does that work for you? It fulfills your mission, your personal mission. How does that work for the organization? You're going to help the organization make sure that the people that are in the organization are happy, because you're going to be invested in better understanding their needs. So that's a why that is aligned with the organization that you're with. And then the how is determining how do you do this thing uniquely? What is it that makes you do this thing differently from someone else? It could be your history. It could be your experience. It could be where you come from. That could be the reason that maybe you care about a particular demographic, and that could align with your organization as well. The third part is the what, right? The what is then the actual work that you do. Where do you sit within the ranking? Are you junior? Are you senior? Are you middle management? What does it mean in terms of what you'll be able to move? Because you can't set a goal that you can only achieve if you're senior within an organization, if you're a junior person in the organization. So for about 2 sessions, we just go into determining those 3 answers. What is your why? How do you do things? And what is the what? The second session is then the target audience. Who is going to move the needle for you? And it's the same thing you can do when you rebrand, right? Who is going to move the needle for you that is going to get you to the goal that you're setting for 2026 when it comes to your personal brand? And then the third, this is 4 sessions now. 5 and 6 is going into numbers, right? What is the number that is going to get you to a position where you're comfortable? So even as you go into negotiations for salary, determining when is the right time to have the conversation around getting a better number when it comes to your job, I literally sit with you and I say, When do you guys look at these numbers in the organization? Do you even know? Who can give you the data? What do you need to be earning in order for you to be comfortable? And is this position going to get you there, or are you going to get there within the next 3 years?
Yeah.
When we're done with that, we go to platforms only. So you see, platforms only appear in session 8, if I'm not mistaken, to then say what is going to position you outside of even the organization that you're in as the authority when it comes to a person who can help people move from middle management to senior management, and then you start figuring out what is the data you need to be sharing. How do you build that authority? How do you become the voice? Do you need to be speaking in conferences or not?
Yeah.
So there is a very clear guideline that I take you through when it comes to building a personal brand if you've never explored these things, or you're thinking about rebranding because you're changing directions, you're changing jobs, or you just want to tell a different story when it comes to your personal brand.
Nomndeni, in 2 seconds, where are you available for people to find these resources?
The best way to find me is on my website. It is www.nomndeni, NOMNDENI.com. That's the best place to find me. You'll get all this information that I've shared there.
That's Nomndeni Sethole. Nomndeni, a very big thank you to you for sharing those insights. Always great catching up with you. Nomndeni Sethole is the CEO and founder of Agenda Women, speaking about how to invest in your personal brand, whether you're rebranding or just starting from scratch, so that you have, a good value proposition. You're able to find the right platforms to, get out and find the audience that's for you, what makes you stand out. Those are the sort of conversations and the questions that you need to be asking yourself. And what best describes you when you're not in a room? How do people best remember you, whether it's by excellence or any other word? I mean, Nomndeni used the example of being called warm when she is not around. Unfortunately, that's the very end of today's show. It's all we have time for. A very big thank you to you as well for listening, and to all of the guests that we had on the show today. We do it again tomorrow. It's just a minute after 8 o'clock. After the Eyewitness News update, the Aubrey Masango show will begin.